Right, so the next question we had was in relation to weight gain. So obviously this one applies as well. Often the whole industry just focuses on weight loss and everything's towards weight loss, but obviously we want to actually gain some muscle over time as well. So when it comes to gaining muscle, I think it can be quite psychologically challenging in that some guys in particular always want to gain more and more and more and more and more, and then some females are kind of hesitant to even gain anything at all. So
the females try to look at the guys and copy their rate of gain.
Yes, do not want.
Yeah.
So kind of overall, what rate of gain, percentage of body weight or whatever, are we looking at per week or per month, which I think is more applicable in this instance. I'm kind of a fan of looking at it monthly as opposed to weekly. What are we looking for when someone is trying to gain some muscle?
Well, generally what I always look at, you have to obviously take the individual into account, as with all of the things.
With everything we
say.
say.
It's like, okay, who is the individual? How long have they been training for? Obviously me giving advice to a beginner who's just coming to the gym versus your seasoned veteran that maybe has 1 pound of muscle to gain through the rest of his entire career of actual lean muscle. The two rates of gains are going to be completely different. So you have to take the individual into account and where you are currently. But then I always look at the research and I'm like, okay, so what's the maximum they've ever recorded of muscle gain? And that's lean body mass. So that's, a little bit of water weight as well, some actual contractile tissue, some glycogen, whatever else is going along in that. And it's 1 kilo per month.
Yeah.
So I'm like, if 1 kilo is the maximum, okay, you don't want to be gaining 1 kilo a week.
No.
And
here's one of the big issues, guys, is that a lot of the people you follow on Instagram that have a lot of muscle that are saying things like, I've gained 10 pounds in the last 2 months, or here's how to gain 12 pounds in 12 weeks or whatever, they're on drugs.
But even forget about that. If you go from a very lean state to a lean state, you still look lean.
Yeah. It's
like, okay, you look like you gained 12 pounds, but it's like, no, you've actually just filled in a little bit of fat around the hamstrings, the adductors, these little areas that it's not very visible. It's like, Jesus, he actually looks so much bigger, but they've gained fat. Yeah. So even if they're on drugs, it's like, okay, you're still getting you're still getting fatter.
That's the thing, it's still not accelerating it to that degree, but I just think it's important to point out that it differs from fat loss in that a lot of the strategies used in terms of muscle building and a lot of the things you hear about muscle building come from the bodybuilders, and typically those that are in the magazines and stuff like that, because that's where everyone starts reading. So often that can then influence kind of your thoughts as someone who's just a beginner lifter fresh out of the pond. So it is a completely different thing that we're expecting. So kind of getting back to that, let's say someone has been, we'll kind of start with let's say beginner, intermediate, advanced. What rates of gain are we looking at? So I'm going to say the beginner, you could be looking at somewhere between 1 to 1.5 kilos of gain per month. I think is a fair rate to aim for.
Yeah, sometimes I'm a little bit more aggressive at the block with a beginner.
Yeah, if they're a raw beginner just in the gym.
I'm just aim for 2 kilos.
Yeah.
I'm because you're going to already have these dietary inconsistencies and all this kind of stuff, and I'm I'd rather overshoot it a little bit with a beginner than undershoot
especially
it.
if they're lean already.
Yeah, exactly. But I always kind of see them they like to see the scale go up.
Yeah.
So it's it motivates them further, and it's okay, I'll gain 2 kilos this month. You're okay, so now they're going to attack the next month. So again, that psychological aspect of gaining the weight, even if it's at a faster rate, then I know that they can actually build muscle. I'm it kind of evens out. And much like when we talked about fat loss at the start of a gaining phase, it might be initially faster again from glycogen and all that kind of stuff, but then it should slow as you get further into it. But generally as a beginner, I'm looking at that somewhere between 1 to 2 kilos of gain. Then as an intermediate, what are you thinking?
I think we're just kind of bringing it down in around half kilo increments maybe. Maybe the average for an intermediate then would be, let's say we've said 1.5 to 2 for the beginner, maybe 1 to 1.5 then for that intermediate lifter is fair. And I think intermediate, it's hard to put kind of a number on it, because it depends, are you classifying it as how many years you've been training or how many years you've been properly training, which are two different things. But I think once you've been training for more than maybe 2 to 3 years consistently, I think you'd call yourself an intermediate lifter. And then the advanced lifters, so people that are in the 5 to 10 year bracket, I think like anything more than a kilo a month is pushing things.
I wouldn't even be going that high. I'd be like 0.5 to a kilo, and a kilo would be like, you're getting fat. So I think you're correct in what you'd say. Again, 1.5 to 2 kilos for rank beginner, that kind of 1 to 1.5 for that intermediate bracket, and then it's that kind of 0.5 to 1-ish for the advanced. And then for a female, I would half all of those numbers. Just half those numbers. But yeah,
I think an important one on that as well is that you see a lot in research, the people that are called non-responders. Okay, so obviously there is a factor that some people are going to gain muscle faster than others, but there's also the fact that when you actually account for a program being customized for someone as opposed to it being a generic program, you see that a lot of those that rate, the amount of non-responders you have in research actually starts to decrease. So there was some research on that recently. So another important thing to note there is just like ensure that you're actually not just looking at the scales and thinking about what's happening, but also looking about like, are you even progressing? Like if you're not getting any stronger at all and nothing's changing and you don't feel like you look different, yet you're gaining 2 kilos a month, that's very different to the person that has added 10 kilos to their squat, that feels like they're thriving in the gym, and it looks visibly different as well. So like that's another thing to consider with the muscle gain.
You always have to take the individual into account. And again, like a lot of people try to sell you programs based on this, and it's like, oh, you need to sort these hormones out, or you need to sort this is the magic supplement you're missing, they're on it, and like all these kind of things. But it comes down to you actually having a customized plan to suit your individual needs. So I'd be in 100% agreement in terms of actually getting a plan that suits you as an individual, but then also tailoring it over time to you as an individual. Because again, like beginner versus the advanced person, this is another thing with training and nutrition. People always look at what's the advanced guy doing. It's like, that's not what they were doing.
They've got there over years and years and years.
It was not what they were doing when they were at your stage. They were doing all these things, and that's the reason they're at this stage, But another thing that we actually need to address on this is, how long are we looking at this rate of gain? Okay, because people are going to go, they said 1% per 1 kilo per month, and it's like 4 years down the line, and they're going, I gained a kilo per month. And you're like, okay, you actually are morbidly obese now. So like, how long are we taking this? Are we taking a traditional bulk and cut? You're going, I'm bulking for the winter, and then as soon as February kind of time rolls around, I'm going to cut for the summer. Are we looking at that, or are we looking at like distinct week periods?
I think there's kind of a very broad bracket of about 12 to 24 weeks, I think, is a good idea for someone to be gaining for. And the reason I put it so broad is because I'm looking at where you're actually starting. If you start at 6% body fat versus 10 versus 15, they're different time spectrums that you can actually apply that rate of weight gain. Like if the person at 15% body fat, even if they are a beginner, and they start gaining, if they start gaining 2 kilos per month, they're going to be pretty fat, as opposed to the person at 6% body fat who's a beginner who gains that 2 kilos per month, because they're going to come from different areas as well. So I think the leaner you are, the longer you can afford to drag that period out for. But I generally think 12 to 24 weeks is a good place to be for most people. Even from a psychological perspective, we like to come back to the psychological stuff quite a bit, but people start to get a bit demotivated. Like, even though they mightn't be that fat as such, they still get to the point where they're like, I don't feel like I'm gaining that much muscle anymore, because the fat is now covering some of those lumps and stuff, those muscles that you were seeing, so you're not actually seeing any progress. So I think even if you do cut it at 24 weeks or at 12 weeks or whatever, a short dieting period followed by getting back into it is a good idea.
I like, again, like from a psychological perspective, like having an end date. Like just being like, whatever it is, like even if you decided at the start of the diet and it's presumptuous arduous in terms of like you could be at that stage and be like, I'm still actually gaining and I'm still relatively lean. Like actually just having an end date to aim for, like whether it's that's the length of the program. Like we generally have like 16-week programs, whether it's the length of the program or whether it's a certain date in time that you're like, okay, I'm going to start cutting then, or I'm going to transition to a maintenance, or I'm going on holidays, or whatever it is. Like actually having a date in time where you're like, that's the end of this phase. So again, people kind of lose sight of the forest and the trees if they have no date in mind. Like they just wander around aimlessly because they're like, their training sessions go to shit because they're like, oh, the calories will do their job.
The calories
like, you know, it'll
keep you growing.
Magic, you know. And it's like, okay, no, you want to be thinking, I have 16 weeks to gain this weight, and at 16 weeks I'm done. I'm going to transition to maintenance or mini cut or a full cut, or I'm going to reassess my plan. But you have a date in mind that that's when something's going to change.
And I think one more important point on that one, especially with weight gain, is remember that in order to keep that rate of gain up for 24 weeks, food is going to have to keep creeping up. And while for me and you, it's no problem for us to say, oh yeah, you know, I'll just keep eating more calories, it's no problem. I know some people just get to the point where they're like Kyle's watching this, like you get to the point where you just don't want to eat anymore. Like you just get to that point where you're just full all the time, you're not even enjoying your food. And from that psychological aspect, you could even view your mini cut for 4 to 6 weeks as a period of you sensitizing towards actually enjoying your food again, because that is an important thing as well. So I think that's just one more add-on point. But yeah, in terms of rate of gain, to sum that one up, beginners, we're looking at 1.5 to 2 kilograms per month, half for females, then 1 to 1.5 for intermediate, half for females, and 0.5 to 1 kilo per month for the advanced lifters, and again, half for females.
Yeah, and again, before you put those into practice, actually assess where you are, not just in, are you beginner, intermediate, advanced. Have a look at your body fat, have a look at like what your theoretically what your kind of muscle mass level is at, and then make an assessment, because you could be a ranked beginner and it happens all the time, and you actually already have a good bit of muscle from doing sports, from just genetics. So it's like you're still going to be at a lower rate than someone who has no muscle, or potentially you just have a really good response to training. So not only take your individual starting point into account, but also take your individual response into account. Like don't be afraid to change things. Don't change them obviously preemptively, going like, oh yeah, I'm growing, I need to gain 2 kilos extra this month. It's like, okay, keep it realistic, but you know, change your diet based on real world outcomes.
Yeah, agreed.